Okay, so we're moving on to the second three of the six avatars. So last week we covered the first three, the lifestyler, the lean builder, and the athlete. And today we're going to dive into the second three. And the first up is the lifestyle muscle builder. So Ed, what is the lifestyle muscle builder?
So the lifestyle muscle builder is someone who, following hitting checkpoint, basically wants to build as much muscle as possible, and is willing to make that really the primary focus across the next 1 to 2 years. So in the last episode, we talked about the lean builder, who said for 99% of people listening is probably going to be a more appropriate approach for muscle building. However, if you are okay with accepting some fat gain in the pursuit of that kind of extra couple of percent of muscle that you could potentially get, you are training really hard consistently, and so your training quality is not a bottleneck for your progress, then potentially this is an option you can go down. And this is basically pushing your body weight up in a controlled way, an agreed rate with your coach, up as high as really what you and your coach deem is still appropriate, or kind of you can get value from, because ultimately if you just keep pushing up endlessly, you're just going to become obese rather than becoming jacked. But as high as as you and your coach deem is still worthwhile in terms of the trade-off of muscle to fat gain, that kind of ratio. Now, because we know that if you are natural, you're going to have to spend a good amount of time doing this in order to actually see significant changes in your physiques. We often talk about muscle building phases being a minimum of 12 months, but most people who make the really big jumps in muscle gain are putting in concerted effort for close to 24 months. Now, because none of us here or anyone listening are probably dedicated full-time bodybuilders, putting in concerted effort for that kind of period of time, we need to make sure it's like a sustainable approach. And so just eating chicken and rice out of a Tupperware for 24 months, especially having just done a hard dieting phase to get to that checkpoint, probably not what most people are going to be wanting to do. And that's where the lifestyle factor of this comes in, because we need to make sure, as I said, it's a sustainable approach. So often we'll link this in with moving away from tracking food. It may not be completely, because especially if you are trying to push body weight up, almost the reverse issue of dieting can come into play, whereas if you just eat by how you feel and there's no guidelines, potentially you can undereat and not end up pushing your weight up. Or if you can push your weight up, but not in the same controlled way at the same rate that you've agreed. So there's still going to be some parameters around it, but moving away from full tracking of your food alongside that pursuit of muscle gain. And what makes this a little bit easier is also because you're trying to you're going into a surplus to intentionally increase your body weight, your calories are going to be a lot higher than they've previously been. And so there is a little bit more wiggle room for potential mistakes or flexibility as you do then start to move away from tracking everything 100%.
When you said agreeing on a percentage gain, talk some specifics. What do you think is the upper limit you'd want someone to be gaining at?
I would say as a general rule, 1 to 2% of your body weight per month is a good guideline. So just to reiterate, that's per month. Obviously, when we talk about weight loss, we're often talking about around 1% of body weight per week. Now it's spanned out quite a bit, so 1 to 2% of body weight per month. It doesn't necessarily mean that the faster you gain body weight, the more muscle you're building. That is just going to be like an upper limit on that. And now some of that might be tapped out by how hard you're training. Let's say your training is perfect. Some of it might just be tapped out by how much you're able to recover from. So if your sleep's terrible, stress is really high, etc., maybe that's just bottlenecking it. But let's say you're in this perfect environment, there still is just going to be a genetic limit, which is going to be different for everyone. Mm-hmm. But that if you push up at 2%, you're not necessarily gaining more muscle than if you push up at 1%. Definitely, like if you push up at 3, 4, 5% of body weight per month, sorry. It doesn't mean that the gains are just going to keep going up in a linear fashion. You're probably going to actually max out that muscle gain, and then any additional is just going to be additional body fat, probably.
Also, 2% for a 60 kilos person isn't even that, it sounds like a lot, but it's not that much when you put it over a month. It requires a lot of discipline to be able to stay within that parameter. And that's 1.2 kilos over the course of a month as a max, which, you can easily do that in a week if you're not careful. So you've got to be very, very disciplined in this approach of building muscle.
Yeah. And anyone that you would suggest this approach not be good for, or good for? Any particular people that come to mind, demographics, age groups, stuff like that?
So for me, it's 99% of the people don't listen to this section. This is not for you. I feel like we just have to put it in there because it is part one of the alleyways. But the reality is that I think you kind of touched on it with the lean builder before, but if you've been overweight for a vast majority of your life, do you want to be intentionally, gaining weight, but some of that's going to be body fat? Like if you do really push this kind of route, there will be a point at which how you feel about how you're looking from an aesthetics perspective starts to drop down. And it's almost like that trade-off there. If you haven't loved your body image for the last 30 years, I would recommend, you've worked so hard to now get into this leaner spot. Enjoy just having like a, not photo shoot lean, but like kind of lifestyle lean physique, health-wise as well. If as you get to the top of your kind of body weight range with this approach, we're never going to push you to a place that's like really unhealthy, but your health isn't going to be as optimal as it was, a few kilos lighter. Also, just in terms of that trade-off I said before, in terms of like that muscle gain, the muscle and fat gain kind of ratio, we want, if we are doing this approach, to have as much muscle. For every gram of fat you gain, you want to gain as much muscle as possible. The reality is that most people kind of listen to this, go to any kind of normal gym, most people's training is just not maximizing it. And I said that example before, let's just imagine training is perfect. Like most people's training is far, far from perfect. And that's not, no slight at anyone, it's something that you just have to build up over time. But if training is already having you at a ceiling, there's just no point going with this method, because more calories isn't going to make up for poor training. Until the training door gets opened, that's always going to limit you. And if your training is poor or you're missing sessions and you're in a surplus, your weight will go up, but it's just fat gain. And then we're just in controlled fat gain rather than controlled muscle gain. And you're basically just reversing what you've taken all this time to get to checkpoint to ultimately do.
The only reason why you want to go up in body weight anyways is when you do max out your strength gains. So you can create more leverage to hopefully lift a bit more weight and to hopefully build some more muscle. Otherwise, that's the only ever reason you want to do it. You want to max the body weight out and then go up and keep playing that way. As the old bodybuilders used to say, weight moves weight. But for the only times I've seen it, I would just answer to your question is it's like people who are just naturally skinny. People who are naturally skinny, they didn't have much weight to lose in the first place. Young. Might be some niche scenarios in there.
Really want to really enjoy their training. Not just seeing as a tick box. They're sending videos every week. Like we've had quite a few successful people do this, but
Nichols is a good example.
Obsessed with their training. They're obsessed with their training, sending videos all the time, loving the feedback. Like really enjoy that side of things. If you're 50-50 on training, you skip leg day half the time. All these it's just not worth it. And so just one other thing I was just going to mention was also just keeping in mind that if you do push up to, this heavier position with body fat slightly higher, it's unlikely you're going to want to maintain that long term, which means there is going to have to be some form of diet after it. Maybe not all the way back to say a photo shoot condition, but most people aren't going to want to hold at that top end kind of fluffy position long term. And so if getting to your checkpoint initially, depending on, if you went really just found the dieting really easy, you got there just 1% every week, bam, 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 really straight line, bam, maybe that's not an issue. But if that did drag out a little bit longer, potentially didn't enjoy all of the fat loss phase, whatever it is, you just got to factor in. You've then got to do that again to get back to that leaner physique with more muscle this time. But, is that something you want to go through? If you made a 12-week diet into a 26-week diet, last time, is that something you really want to do again? Because it's just more and more time just having to spend in a dieting phase.
I think anyone over 40 shouldn't really be considering this route. I think if you're in your 20s and you've gotten lean and you think, I want to build some muscle, I think it's great. Like absolutely go for it. I did it. I think we all did it a period of this in our lives. I think it's responsible for the physiques we have now. I think it can be a really benefit in the future. And then if you're in your 30s and you really love training, it could be a game you play once. We had Nichols, a really good example of it. So if you haven't listened to that podcast, check that one out. I've got a returning member at the moment, Raj, who he joined us 2019, got in really good shape. I think he had about 10 kilos to lose, got into photo shoot condition. And then he's pretty much spent 3.5 years now building, but he absolutely loves training, frothing at the mouth at the logbook, joined the local bodybuilding gym. he's overtraining like 6 days a week because he just loves it so much. And now he wants to peel it all back and get into the shape for his 40th. And he said in his application form, he goes, oh yeah, I think I've gained a legit 8-9 kilos of muscle. I said, oh, we'll see about that. And that's another thing probably another thing worth considering is a caveat here is if you push your body weight up 15, 20 kilos and you go really aggressive on this, just manage your expectations that you might end up only 1 or 2 kilos. You might end up 1 or 2, 3 kilos.
You're not even going to. You're going to come back at the same body weight. You're just going to be leaner. That's literally it.
Well, that's what's happened to me every time.
Well, if you look at loads of natural bodybuilders, and I know we're not talking about that's not necessarily this population, but it's still the same kind of human body. Most natural bodybuilders, after like a few years of competing, like their stage weight doesn't go up. I mean, a lot of people, their stage weight never goes up. Their first ever stage weight is the heaviest they ever get on the stage. And it's not that they don't build any muscle across their career. It's just that they get better at getting leaner and also retaining the muscle mass on the way down. So normally people's body weight will either hold the same or go lower across their career, despite adding muscle. And it's because, you come back in. Now that sounds really depressing, but the reality is if you come back to the same body weight as you were before with a few more pounds of muscle, you look dramatically better because you are dramatically leaner and you've got significantly more muscle. So on paper, it's a depressing thought. And, you can understand why people want to jump on drugs when they hear that. But it doesn't, how depressing it looks on paper doesn't translate to visuals. I think you can still make there's big visual changes despite the numbers on the scales not being so impressive.
Well, in this specific example, he went from 61 at checkpoint up to 84 at the end of this bulk. And I said, all right, we'll see how you look at 68 and then book your shoot. He said, I thought I'd be at shoot weight at 68. And then no. But what you said there around your career is so true. I mean, I didn't have a career, so to speak, but my first time I stepped on stage, I was 71 kilos. The last time I did a shoot, I was 69. But I looked like
way leaner,
and way more muscle. So it's just, it's night and day difference. And in fact, funny enough, the 4 times I've got shredded, each one has actually been lighter, progressively lighter each time.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe just to give some people some good guidelines, in terms of just something quantifiable, is that if you get into a photo shoot lean condition, probably like most people are going to want to add about 10% to that in terms of being like a sustainable lifestyle kind of lean. Just one, from a health perspective, but 2, just from having a bit of flexibility of food, being able to go out for meals here and there, not having to do crazy amounts of cardio. That's probably like a baseline for most people who get in really good shape. But then from there on up, I think a good baseline is not really going above that 20%. I think if you are in that kind of lean builder side of things, 10 to 15% above shoot weight is probably like a good range for most people. Don't 100% quote me on that. 9% might be good for someone. Someone might not enjoy life till it's 16, whatever it is, but that's probably going to be a good spot. I would say for this lifestyle muscle builder, I think 20% is a good cap for most people, or at least having a big reassessment around that 20%. So let's say you do hit checkpoint and you do a shoot at 60 kilos. I would personally, as a general recommendation, don't go above 72 kilos. And if you do get to 72 kilos and you feel like you do want to keep pushing up more, I'd recommend just having a stop, making sure you look at some photos, have a bit of a reassessment. Yeah, like potentially blood work, look at your blood pressure, but then just seeing where you're at, because one, if blood work and blood pressure are tanking, then it's probably an easy call not to. But also just looking at your photos, like if you're a guy and you're looking at these photos and you're questioning whether you even work out or not. You've got a belly, your pecs, and now man boobs. It's like it's probably not a worthwhile trade-off for most people. So I think, I would say as a really general rule, once you hit a photo shoot level leanness, get 10% above it. Hold between 10 and 15 for most people, but if you really want to push it up, probably close to that 20% is probably like a good chance to either cut it off or at least have a strong reassessment at that point.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Just thinking like where my body weight ranges are. I think I'd say the strongest I've been in my life was around 85 to 87 kilos, which is just above the 20%. So it's probably around there. And then anything after that, I remember I tried to add more kilos. The highest I've got to was 91, but I never gained any more strength between that and 91.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see 200 pounds on the scale.
Yeah.
For one day.
And then you start realizing that PRs you're hitting on the leg press isn't because you're getting stronger, it's just because your stomach's getting bigger and your stomach goes deep.
Yeah. Range of motion.
Yeah. And obviously this is a very niche avatar. And I met there's a guy in the gym who, like, you just chat to the guys at the gym, and there's one guy, he said he's doing a bit of Muay Thai, so we started speaking, but he's actually like a bodybuilder. Well, he's a normal dude, but he likes bodybuilding. And he got up to like 102 kilos, and he's like 6'3". So he's a tall guy. So 103 kilos. And he's now like 93. And I said, "Oh, what are you thinking of doing?" He said, "Oh, I want to, once in my life, I'd love to get like, just get into like a photo shoot condition." I said, "What are you predicting?" He said, "Well, I'm thinking like high 80s." I looked at him. I said, "No offense. Like, feel free to discard this."
See, this is where I just nod and be like, "All right, just move on."
I mean, I've got a decent.
You're already there.
I've got a decent relationship with him, so I just felt the compelled, especially because he said he's hired a physique coach. So I was like, I just felt compelled to like tell him. I said, just to like step into reality. When I used to compete in bodybuilding, over 75 was considered heavyweight. And I think you might be around that mark. he was just shocked. And he said, "Yeah, I'm gonna go carry on with my session now." I said, "Yeah, cool." I mean, it's a hard pill to swallow for a lot, but I think like in the overarching consensus, if you're gonna build it all up, just get ready to take it all off and just be ready for a long, hard diet, because a 20 kilo gain is a 20 to 24 week minimum diet.
Oh yeah, that's kind of pretty aggressive, isn't it? Yeah. But I'd say, although it's a niche, I think it's a niche category in terms of who should probably do it. I think it's a very popular first choice for most guys, like some women as well. But it's probably the go-to for most guys. Like, oh no, I just want to get jacked. Like, but it's just keeping in mind these trade-offs, and if you're getting feedback from a coach that you've got 5 reps in the tank on every single set you're doing, it's just not worth doing, because you've got so much potential progress by just learning to train harder that you don't need to gain all this body fat alongside it to unlock this.
How do you actually learn to train harder? What do you think? We've said that quite a few times this podcast.
I think you've got to get in and around people in person. I think that's the real key. I think you just got to take those opportunities. And whether that's training,
find like a hardcore gym sort of thing.
It can either be a hardcore gym, or it's just training with people who train harder than you. And that just resets your bar. And I think of a lot of the gyms, I think some of this was just luck, but a lot of the guys, I was never a member, like a regular member of like a hardcore gym, but just growing up, when I got into the gym, where I went to uni, then had this group of friends, whatever, like I was just always around people who were just stronger than me. Like I was just like the smaller, pretty weak one.
I mean, the rugby crowds, right?
Yeah, and then I just had like, I ended up just at uni in my halls. The 2 guys I was best mates with, both of them just turned up. Like one of them was benching 150 and the other one was benching 120. And so when I was putting like whatever I was doing on the bar, it was just how we were always unloading it for me. Like I was always just like the smaller one. And then it just happened a few times like that. Then the first gym I started properly PTing in was like this CrossFit gym. And, like, say what you want about CrossFitters, but like those guys train hard, and there's some absolute freaks in there. Like there was a guy about my age, deadlifted, I think it was 170 for 20 on one of the first times I walked in. I was just like, all right, this is another level up. So, I trained there. I was like, I did well as a trainer, but I was always like the weak trainer, if you know what I mean. So it was like, it's always, and then you get to a normal gym, or you start working at another gym, and the next thing I know, I'm training. I joined one gym, last gym I worked at before here, and like I walked in training way harder than any other trainers. I'm in better shape than most trainers. I was like, what the hell's going on here? I'm the skinny fat one. Like was like, so I think it's just realigning like your expectations, and that can be tough if you don't, luckily just have it fall into place a bit like me, I guess. But some of that is also just looking for it. I did an internship one time. And they basically said, we train, the other S&C coaches there, they were like, we train at 6 a.m, so we expect you to come here and learn how to train. So I was like a 45-minute bike ride to get there at 6 a.m. before the day started each day. But I just did it. You're around guys who are deadlifting, squatting like, in the mid 200s. You just learn to push harder. What you think's normal just changes, and like it's formative, even if it's not, like always the best training on paper.
Yeah. Great. What about you? What was your like formative years for training? Obviously it's pre-gymnastics.
Yeah. Well, the formative years was just, I was working at a gym, and all of us were very into the heavy duty type Mike Mensa stuff for a bit. Like there was a huge emphasis. There was this company in Australia, and the guy who ran it was just like very well spoken. I love listening to him. I was like, this guy's the king. He knows everything. So when you're bought into a methodology, you just go all in, right? So his whole thing was, your deadlift is a direct representation of your physique. Like there's no other way. I thought you were
going to say self-worth there.
Yes, I thought you said it.
Pretty much that as well. Like they were very religious about the deadlift, and again, conventional, whatever. No regard for form. It's like you get the bar from the bottom to the top. That's it. That's all you got to do. Don't stop focusing on technique. Stop focusing on this. Just get the bar up. That was the whole emphasis, just like heavy back squats, but it wasn't just heavy. It was like heavy with high repetitions, like everything to pretty much failure. He goes, you train to failure because you know whether or not you've progressed. There is no ifs or buts. There is no question. You push to your limit every time, you rest, and you come back and do it again. And it was that type of training for like a really long time. And all of us in our gym were doing that. And it was like competitions between who get the best like PBs, the best 1RMs, best estimated 1RMs. That was always my thing. I could always go for super high reps. So I was like, you keep your top end strength. I'll just go high press, high rep leg press, high rep fucking deadlifts, all that type of stuff. And I loved it.
What sort of reps? Fantastic. What sort of reps you do?
My best RDL was 200 for 10.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that's big.
But that was
200 for 10
below the kneecaps.
Okay. Yeah. Even then, moving that for 10 times is not a joke. What sort of body weight were you?
Flat back. I was 87, 88 back then.
Wow, strong.
Yeah.
What was it 1RM? 202?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, probably, pretty much. Yeah. I could never, maybe, I think 210 for 5, maybe. That was like.
Wow, it drops off that much.
Back. Yeah, my back started to go and all that type of stuff. So
that's impressive.
Went quite a bit. Did low bar, 160 for 10 with chains, shit like that. It was good fun back then. I did my best high bar squat after grass was 120 for 17.
Yeah, nice.
Well. Nice. So, but yeah, again, it was all just we pushed the limit every set. Yeah, and every set was just scary. Like I was nervous for every set beforehand. Like I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna do this. We gotta crank up the music. All that type of stuff, right? Because it's do or die. One set, you have one set to prove yourself. Otherwise, you're nothing.
I mean, the Widowmaker stuff, that stuff's scary, isn't it? I mean, that scares the living daylights.
Yeah.
The workout's only 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, that section of the workout, but you're thinking about it all morning.
Yeah.
You've got to be in such a state in order to pull that off. Like, you done 8 reps and you somehow got to get to 20 plus. It's just, and it's just scary.
Yeah. It is. And you don't know how it's going to go. And, if you don't hit your PRs, you're like fuming if you don't get a PR. And it's just like, it's a very mentally draining and physically draining way to train. But it was good fun.
I once hired DC Training by Dante Trudeau. I once hired one of Dusty Hanshaw. I once hired him as a coach, and one of his training routines had it was like one set. It was like one set of 10 on the pendulum, one set of 20, and then one set of 50. Then after that, 2 sets of 30 on the leg press, each pause at the bottom for 2 seconds. And the anxiety around that workout was just it was so much. And I'd be sore for a week as well doing that. And I needed I brought 2 training partners in with me for that workout because it's one of those ones that you need people to get you through there. I think training partners is another way. If you can find a good training partner, it can really make a difference. Like finding good training partners can make or break your training, especially when you're really aggressive in muscle building.
Yeah, but if not, it's just using, even if it's one-off times, just ways to recalibrate the bar. Like obviously, we're obviously going to push our in-person stuff. I think it's a great opportunity for members to come along and get that. Even if it's only a couple of times a year, you get to get your form checked, but you get to get pushed in person. Obviously, that's only available for people who can get to London on those dates. But there is other time. There's RNTers who got I'm not sure what was their group called, like the Muscle Builders, or and
they do their own voice session every month.
Yeah, that's something they meet up now and then, and they sometimes go to some of the more hardcore gyms, bodybuilding gyms around London. There's a bit of a social, but also I know they push themselves all hard and pushing each other. So it's that kind of thing. And if you can create a bit of a community, or I guess it's just linked into what you said really with the training partners, but even if it's not every single week, but just having those times, it just resets the bar. And that every time you go and say the leg press, you think you're working hard, but then once every couple of months you do it with your mate and you go to like another level and you add like 5 reps to what you normally do. When you're on your own, you may not still go to those extra 5 reps, but if you go another 2 reps up, you're still just edging closer, and it's just improving more and more over time. And there's definitely a skill element to it. So it's not like, oh, you're not training as hard as you could, like you're a pussy. It's like it just takes time and exposures to get yourself there. Because when your legs first start hurting on a leg extension, the first time you ever do it, you're like, oh God, I'm done. But over the years, you realize actually I can accept this pain and still keep moving my legs. And actually I can just keep going. And then you just get more used to it. And it's something that I think I'm learning more on the cardio side now, because I'm not perfect by any means, but I can push pretty hard in the resistance training side of things. But I know my perception of what's really hard in cardio isn't actually that hard in the grand scheme of things. Like, let's say in the gym, if I think something's a 10 out of 10, it's probably say 9 out of 10, let's just say. But in cardio, if I think something's a 10 out of 10, it's probably still only a 6 to what it actually potentially could be, just because I haven't put enough miles in of just like living in that place where you're feeling metallic taste in your mouth, your heart's smashing out your chest. Like, there are people who have more experience who can get to that point, not panic, just be like, yeah, this is normal, and just keep moving at the same pace, or even kick on from there. So I think it just takes time, but not just time, it takes like focused time. There's loads of people with 10 years of a gym membership for 10 years, but still train like pussies. But actually, if you just do a year of really focused, trying to progress, trying to push harder, you can get way further than those people have in the last 10 years.
I think I asked, like, I created a bit of a tangent there, but I think it's just important because that whole segment applies to all 6 of the avatars. Whatever the activity of choice is, if you apply this intensity for a period of time, you will get substantial accelerated results.
Never a bad thing. It's never a bad thing.
No.
In my opinion, you just have to learn how to channel it and do it properly, and not do stupid shit like we did.
And they don't overdo it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, moving on to the next one, the lifestyle athlete. Ivan.
Yeah. So with a lifestyle athlete, it's going to be very similar to the lifestyle muscle builder. The only main difference is going to be the goals here. So with the lifestyle athlete, you're going to be focusing on a performance thing that you enjoy, whether it's running, cycling, a sport, 5-a-side. You want to be the best 5-a-side footballer in your team, mate. We can make that happen, right? So it's about learning how to maximize everything in that area, while also not being super strict with your nutrition and not letting it take over your life. I think last week we discussed the athlete phenotype that I was talking about, where everything is tracked meticulously because you want to make sure you're optimizing performance, this and that. But I think this is a more relaxed version of that, where it's like, yeah, you can still focus on performance, you can still focus on getting better, but at the same time, you're also learning how to potentially intuitively eat, move away from tracking, learning to listen to your body's hunger signals, learning to listen, okay, my body needs a bit more fuel for this session, my body probably doesn't need as much fuel for this session, right? Learning how to listen to your body in that regard, and not being so hung up on perfect calories, perfect macros, this and that. So yeah, it's pretty much blending like your ideal lifestyle solution from a nutritional perspective, but still prioritizing your sporting performances, your cardio, your athletic endeavors, right? So you're trying to get this perfect blend of fantastic performance where you can just allocate all your resources to that, and let nutrition just be a bit of a byproduct on the side. And I think for most people that can be very alluring, and I think it's a really good way for most people to live as well. And it also just creates this healthy relationship with nutrition over the long term as well. So I think it's definitely a win-win. It keeps you healthy. Usually for people who are looking to chase athletic endeavors, you're going to naturally be on the leaner side. So you may actually find it easier to stay lean because, if your goal is like running a marathon, being a better runner, just helps being lean. It's a bit of a no-brainer there, right? So you don't really have to try on that regard. That may just happen as a byproduct of you wanting to be better at your sport. So I think there's a lot of cool benefits that can come from this. So, but yeah, it's all about picking that challenge that you really want to dedicate yourself to, that you really enjoy doing, and going all in on that, while also just making nutrition more of a background thing versus this all-encompassing thing.
It's probably more of a fun. We talked about the athlete last week. This is probably more of a fun version of the athlete, essentially.
Agreed. Yeah, 100%. And I think with this sort of lifestyle, you can go out, you can socialize, you can do your thing. Like obviously, we still want to practice sensibility when we go out and whatnot, but it's not as You know, it's not as important for this lifestyle athlete to go to bed on a Saturday night at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. so he can get up at 6 a.m. and do 5x5 VO2s. Don't know anyone who did that, but you know, for that sort of person, they don't need to do that. I just like, I want to go out and I'm going to play some, you know, five-a-side on Sunday with my mates and just kill them. You know, so
I like how you're using this five-a-side example with this one. This is the five-a-sider.
Well, I used to play football back in the day.
I think it's also probably someone who has an athletic goal in their top 3 priorities, but it's not number 1.
Yeah.
You know, like there is that work or family or whatever those other 2 are, and it's just accepting that things aren't going to be optimal. Like the athletic one is all about trying to optimize as much as possible. This is accepting a suboptimal approach to factor in.
Is this us, Head? Me and you?
Yeah, no, yeah. I think it probably is. Like, it's one of those of like, let's say, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo, if his kid wakes up in the middle of the night sick, he's probably not getting up to deal with it. You know, if his wife's off on a girls' trip over the weekend, he's not single parenting all weekend, is he? Like, he's still doing what he needs to do. He's not grabbing lunch at a soft play because they get stuck there or whatever. You know, like, whereas is
that what you did yesterday?
What was it? That was Sunday. I've done 3. We have bank holiday weekend. I've done 3.5 hours in soft plays in the last 2 days. So that's probably why that was in my head. But it's factoring in just the real world for most people who are listening to this.
The real world athlete.
A real world athlete, basically. So it's accepting that, you know, you're going to be now potentially not going to have as much sleep, and that's where, although the probably biggest component of that is the nutritional flexibility, but it's also just understand that actually the way your training's set up, we're probably just going for bang for your buck, where we're going to try and get 90% of what you need across 3 to 5 sessions a week, rather than adding another 3 sessions where you're doing maybe 8-10 sessions a week to get that extra 10%, which if you're going all out, if you're Ivan, those extra sessions are worth it. But for most people with these other demands, you're happy to get maxed out at 90% to allow yourself actually to be able to have these other elements of your life in there as well.
You're doing the long run on Sunday, but you're not doing the 5x5 VO2s on Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're going for a run with your mates.
Yeah.
Locking yourself in a room, killing yourself for no reason.
I like how Ivan's making this one like the social one. Like the 5x5, sorry, the run with the mates, the 5-side football.
That's good. Basically, if you're not getting up at 6 a.m. on Sunday to do 5x5, Ivan thinks you're just a social. You know, you're.
What's 5x5? Is it 5x5 minutes?
Yeah, VO2. It's ridiculous.
Was that 5 minutes at 70% sort of thing?
No, 5 minutes at max. So what you can hold for 5 minutes. Yeah. But paced over 5x5, right? So 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. So
what sort of heart rate is that?
Scares the shit out of me. Well, you wanna get that up as close to max as you can, but it's more about being able to keep like a super high cadence the whole time and keep your power up as well. That's the hardest bit. So it's about pacing, and it's the most mentally challenging thing I do every single week.
Really?
I love it. Yeah. It's character building, but it's fucking brutal, but very effective.
So your quads, must be seriously pumped during that.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, the higher cadence helps tax the heart more than the legs, because when you're training VO2, you want to tax the lungs and heart more versus the legs. If you don't want the legs to be the limiting factor. So yeah. But I do eventually just give out not too much.
Yeah. I've noticed in the last year, my VO2 on my Garmin is gradually going down because I'm not doing the high intensity runs because of whatever reason. And I just got it when I saw it used to be at 54, and then it's just slowly nowadays I'm looking at it, it's at 51. So what's going on here? And I think it's because I'm not doing any of that stuff.
Don't invest your time into that. It's not accurate. Don't worry about it. It's probably the same.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it doesn't track me doing the Muay Thai stuff, so it thinks all I do is easy runs.
Yeah.
Last one, the athletic builder.
So this is for someone who's wanting to build muscle as like their primary goal, but without losing kind of any athletic capabilities they've got, or I think as I described it earlier when we were before recording, like just becoming a slob basically. Let's say you do take that approach where you're pushing body weight up, and you're pushing hard in your sessions, but also you're probably doing like maybe 4 hours of actual activity a week. Most of that's probably rest periods between sets. It's very easy that if you do that for a year, 2 years, that cardiovascular side of things is probably going to be fairly low. Now, when we actually look at it in world, like population kind of wise, you're still hitting an okay step count. You're still a lot healthier than most people out there. But if you do want to, do that 1 or 2 years of focused muscle building, but as we said before, it needs to be in a way that you enjoy and that's sustainable for you to keep doing it for that period of time. Maybe, part of you having an enjoyable life, you socializing, whatever it is, the example we keep coming back to, maybe it's five-a-side with the boys on a Friday night, or it's whatever, it's having the ability basically to jump in on, like your mate calls you up, I'm doing a park run this Saturday, do you want to join in? It's having the ability to do these things without your back, blowing up after a kilometer in, you can't breathe. Your ankle goes. Don't know who that would happen to. But it's basically just maintaining at least like a baseline level of like fitness and health during like that muscle building phase, and whether that is for a sport that you do like socially, or just because you just want to maintain like a certain level of fitness during that muscle building phase as well.
This is basically not being that guy who he has that really heavy breath. And like someone who's really embracing the fluff and they just breathe so loud. And I remember one time we were training with two guys, and one guy was aggressively pushing his body weight, and in between like rest periods, he was just breathing so loud. I was saying to him then, I was like, so what you doing with cardio? He's like, I ain't done anything for like 3 years. And he just pushed his body weight up like 25%, and he's just breathing like really loud in between sets because it was just so much demand. So yeah, you want to avoid being that guy.
Yeah, and I think often the way we fall into this trap, and I've probably been that guy as well, is that you think that any kind of cardio or sport or anything or outside of basically just straight up resistance training is just going to be taken away from your gains. Now, there are situations where that can be the case, but with the amount that most people are training, who are us, but I mean especially people listening to the call, the volume of training just across the whole week probably just isn't going to be enough. That if you structure things in like a semi-sensible way, it's probably just not going to be an issue. Don't do that VO2 max session that Ivan just said as a warm-up before your leg session. That's stupid. But if you train legs let's say you train legs on Monday and Thursday, and then potentially do that VO2 session on like say a Saturday or a Sunday, then potentially that could be fine. Or potentially don't do those higher intensity stuff, and you just keep it lower intensity cardio. And again, it's probably not going to be an issue at all. If you're doing a good split for this, so it's not like this is the split for it, but like upper lower cardio off could be a great way of just doing it across the week. You balance it across the week. Those 2 cardio sessions are a lower intensity. You're still going to be able to build a heap of muscle while also just maintaining that baseline, if not improving your fitness across that time as well.
Quick for everyone listening, you don't have to be smashing VO2s to actually improve your VO2 heart health. Honestly, like for most people, just long, slow, steady stuff is going to do so much good for your heart over the long term. So don't think that you're going to be getting like extra points, in my 80s and 90s just because you're doing 5x5 VO2s. You don't really need to do that. You can literally just get the same results health-wise by just taking it slow, just incorporating more of those long runs throughout the week or long rides or what have you. So just for that athletic build-up, don't think that you have to be killing yourself on the cardio to be making those gains as well. You just don't. You can kill yourself in the gym and then use your cardio as a tool just to keep you healthy.
That's good to know for me. I feel like you're speaking to me there. So we've got the lifestyle of the lean builder, the athlete, the lifestyle muscle builder, the lifestyle athlete, the athletic builder. Just to finish up, if we were to forge the ultimate avatar, what would their training split and food look like? And obviously they're all dependent on the goals, but let's assume the typical person that comes to RNT, like one of our members, they're in, let's say, their late 30s, early 40s, or maybe late 40s, in that sort of 35 to 50 bracket. They've lost 10 to 30 kilos on their way down to getting to the best shape of their life, depending on whether they're a man or a woman. And they have a busy career and potentially a family, or at least a busy social life. What would be the ultimate training split / nutrition / avatar here if we were to build one?
I would say you've hit photo condition, get 10, if this is obviously very generalized, but get 10% above that. if at 10% above that, you feel good in terms of like your energy is good, you're satisfied with how you look, maybe not satisfied, but how would you define that? You're maybe not satisfied with how you look yet, but you're content with how you look.
Yeah.
And you're able to perform well, like mentally and physically. Things like your mood, your digestion, your libido, all in a good spot. Menstrual cycle for women. If at 10% above, those things aren't in a good place, then reassess with your coach, because potentially you may need to go, there may be other factors to look at, but potentially you might need to go a little bit hard. But around that 10% above shoot weight is probably like a good spot to get to. From there, I would adapt nutrition to a point that you can maintain the weight you want without feeling high levels of restriction. Now, if that means, for most people, it will mean moving away from tracking everything 100% of the time. Now, to what extent will vary massively, because actually moving completely away from tracking can be more of a drain mentally if you do have a busy life and you're like, not that I have a crazy busy life, but I don't want to put much of my mental bandwidth into nutrition on a daily basis. I want to just automate that as much as possible so I can use whatever limited headspace I've got for things that actually kind of matter to me more. So get nutrition to a place where you don't feel restricted. Find a form of activity that you enjoy taking part in consistently and enjoy trying to progress with. That's either going to probably be a resistance training style thing or a cardio style thing. I would then get the other component and put that in place to support that first one. So if you really enjoy resistance training, have that as your main thing, and then have a baseline of cardio to support health and just like your ability to stay fit enough to actually be able to train hard. If it's the cardio thing, let's say you get really into marathon running, have a baseline of resistance training to support that pursuit of that cardio goal. And then I would just enjoy your life from there, enjoy the process. And you're going to have goals, and there's probably going to be overarching goals where, I want to build my muscle over time, or I want to hit whatever. There's probably going to be some mini spikes in there as well. Maybe it's you want to hit a certain PB over the next couple of months, or maybe you sign up to a 10K or a half marathon. So there's going to be these kind of like spikes of goals, but not getting too fixated on them and just really enjoying the process. I know that sounds so fluffy, but because once you've hit checkpoint, your next real checkpoint is death. You're just trying to enjoy your life and just trying to make the most of it and like optimize what you've got to get the most out of each day. So it's enjoying it is a really big part of it, because so often I think people, or an easy trap to fall into, is constructing an investment phase around a goal, but neglecting that you hate what it takes to achieve that goal. So if you really want a London Marathon medal, but you hate running, it's probably just not a great goal, because as much as you want that medal, if you don't want to go out running 3, 4, 5 times a week for 6 months in the lead up to it, then it's probably just doesn't add up. So it's just making sure that you find something that you can enjoy, because any of these longer term goals take so long. If you're hating every day, you're never going to hang around long enough to actually get to the other end. Find something that you just enjoy just doing, just even if there wasn't this progression element to it. It's just, I want to do this today because I just enjoy doing this. And you'll find you enjoy it more, put more effort into it. Because of that, it's so much easier to be consistent, and you're actually able to hit these goals way, way easier.
Checkpoint and then death.
Love that.
Your next checkpoint is death, yeah.
One quote I read the other day I found so funny but also haunting was, one day you're going to walk into the gym and hit your final PR.
I've thought about that. I feel like
I've already done it.
I feel like I've thought about that a lot. Also, I'll be honest, since 30, I've really started to notice, maybe I wasn't aware, but have I actually hit my peak? I've thought about it a lot, because I'm starting to get some grey hairs. My chest hair's starting to go a bit grey. I'm starting to recede. Like the other month, got a haircut, and the guy left this really long like bit here, right? And he was like, "Oh yeah, you need that." And he was like talking about to cover up like I'm like receding there. I was like, "You cheeky bastard!" And then I actually ended up having to snip it off, because unless I styled it, I just had this really weird long piece here. But I was like, "Fuck! If he's even noticing it, it's got to be real." And then I was thinking, like, look, I know I've never been oil painting, but if I hit my aesthetic peak, like, am I actually just like degrading that?
It's happened, mate.
But it's all going to happen though to all of us.
Oh, I know.
And this is what I always talk about, is just like learning to love the process. And I was going to tie it back to this, because if you're only fixated on that outcome, you're always going to be pissed off. You're always going to be disappointed, right? But if you can learn to look at, okay, how does training impact my day? How does it impact my mood? How does it impact the person I am throughout the day? Like, that's going to make it much easier for you to actually stick to your goals and stick to actually just showing up consistently versus only going to the gym to hit a deadlift PR. Like, if you have that mentality, you're going to be screwed.
Or even worse, I think I see people going to the gym just for the muscle they're going to build. They don't even enjoy the set that they're doing to get there. Like, that's even worse, I think, because if you're only after the muscle that you're going to get in a year's time, you don't put the work that's required into those sessions. No. You just tick them off, and so you never even get that muscle anyway.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Yeah, you only had a few injuries, and you're trying to get back to your old strength, and you just think, is that ever going to happen? I'm picking up the 28 kilo dumbbells for Bulgarian split squats. I was thinking, I used to do these with like 3 bands on my neck during lockdown with more weight, and now I'm like struggling to get back up to where I used to be. But I'm just like, you know what?
Yeah, but think of all the other qualities you've got now, though.
Yeah, I'm just like, you know what? It'll happen one day if I can keep.
It's a trade-off. It's a trade-off, though.
Yeah,
it's a trade-off.
The good thing is once you've built your muscle, it's easier to keep it. I'm still latching onto that. I think that is a key though.
I think a big part of that also though is that, and maybe linking back into like what routes should you go down, is maybe if you are younger, just like in terms of actual age, not just in terms of like experience, but some of those more dedicated avatars might be more appropriate for you. So let's say you're in your mid-20s, the pure athlete, pure muscle building, those kind of things, they might be something that are a great option. But as you get older, there are other elements of your life that become more important, or just more things come onto your plate. But also that if you're not able to make the same kind of progress, or potentially if you have been training for a long time, then potentially at some point it's going to become into more of a maintenance or anti-regression rather than big progression. Now, what I would caveat that with is a lot of the people that we work with, although in terms of age, they're never going to be at their potential peak over their lifetime, because they've done so little up to this point, or everything's so much more optimized now. They could hit PBs at 50, but that's more because they never really hit their potential in their 20s.
They're still newbies.
These lifestyle, the blend with the lifestyle ones are probably become more and more appropriate. And on that, probably the first one we touched on, just the lifestyler, is probably one you want to put on, is like the cherry on top of the cake, really, where you probably don't really want to be pushing onto that one until you're quite far down the line and potentially in like a second or third investment phase. Because if you try and go into that lifestyle one really early, before you've really built any muscle or really pushed yourself physically, you're probably not going to have the skills or like the body that you want or any of these things to actually then shift onto that. And so I would say, if I had to like really sum it up, the really direct ones are probably good in your younger years. The lifestyle integrated ones are probably better as you start to get older. And then I wouldn't really, for most people, look at the lifestyle one until your second or third investment phase, probably. Because at that point, you can put the physical stuff maybe a bit more on the maintenance side of things.
Fantastic. And that's a wrap on the avatars. So go back to listen to the 2 episodes if you need a little recap on the 6, and then pick your poison. Once you're in shape, or if you're already in shape, then go for it, and you can then reap the rewards of the reward phase.